Your Honour, there is a matter that, in fairness, I must put to Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien, you've given evidence that you gave instructions to counsel on the point of Mr. Jackson not being able to assist and his activities being with relation to translations. And I, as a matter of fairness, must put to you that those instructions you gave were false, were they not?
No, I don't believe so. Mr. Jackson does oversee the translation work, but as part of the writing committee member, which he is one of the governing body members on that committee. So,
and I suggest to you, I put to you, that when you gave those instructions, you knew them to be false.
No, I disagree.
And by giving those instructions, you sought to mislead the Royal Commission to protect Mr. Jackson from any potential summons to appear.
No, I disagree. I think the reason we asked consideration to be shown to Mr. Jackson was the grave situation of his father, the very reason he's in Australia.
Yes, well, and in relation to that, in view of what I've put to you, perhaps you can answer this. How are we to know if what you say about Mr. Jackson's compassionate circumstances is in fact true? Your Honour, just prior to resuming the examination of Mr. Spinks, if I might take the opportunity to say something about Mr. Geoffrey Jackson. He's a member of the governing body and he's currently in Australia.
That's the governing body in New York.
That's right. So some weeks ago it came to the attention of the Royal Commission that Mr. Jackson, a member of the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses in New York, was in Australia. We wrote to the lawyers acting for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia and asked if their client would procure a statement from Mr. Jackson and make him available as a witness. The reply that was received was that Mr. Jackson was in Australia for private, compassionate reasons, and also that since the governing body was not involved in the implementation and administration of policies and procedures in relation to child sexual abuse, he would not be able to give relevant evidence. The Royal Commission then left the matter at that point, but subsequently came to the view that Mr. Jackson's evidence would likely be useful for this hearing, particularly in relation to the formulation of policies and procedures by the governing body and the possibility for change of policies and procedures in the future. We therefore wrote last week asking whether the lawyers for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia would accept service of a summons on Mr. Jackson. The reply that was received reiterated that for reasons of compassion related to why Mr. Jackson was in the country, it would, as it was put, be unconscionable for him to be required to prepare to give evidence and to give evidence. Taking that into account, Mr. Jackson has not been summoned to give evidence. We would, however, welcome evidence from him or another member of the governing body, particularly with regard to the setting of policies and procedures and the possibilities for change of those policies and procedures. And the door is open for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia or the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia to present such evidence for this hearing, including by video conference.
Gentlemen, I don't know which of you two should respond to that, but can I make it plain that if it's not plain already, that the Commissioner and I have concern about the process of investigation and determination of allegations within the Jehovah's Witness and whether it's a safe and effective process for the determination of an allegation by a person that they have been sexually abused by someone within the church. Now, I understand the theocratic foundation for the present position, at least I think I do. But at the moment, we do not have a witness, as I understand it, who can tell us what the way forward might be to enable the church to bring its processes into to bring its processes to the point where, rather than run the risk of increasing the trauma on those who have been abused, the processes can assist in alleviating the trauma. It is of fundamental importance to people who have been abused that when they go to the relevant authorities, and in this case it is the church, because the church demands a complaint be brought to the church, but it's of fundamental importance to people who are abused that when they go to the relevant authority, their story is accepted and they have the opportunity to tell the whole of their story to a forum which they can have trust in and which will enable them then to pass, as it were, some of the burden to that institution, which requires, in this case, that it report, or that person report. Now, these are very significant issues. They're not small issues, they're significant issues. And at the moment we're, as I say, facing the situation where we can see a problem, but we do need assistance from the church in what is the solution. And we rather thought that Mr. Jackson might be able to assist us in that respect. I understand the reason for compassion being extended to him. I have no difficulty with that. And for that reason, I have not issued a summons requiring him to attend. But at the moment, we face a serious issue which only the church can help us with. Now, whether that needs a response now, I don't know, but we would like you to reflect upon that situation. Yes, Mr. Stewart.
Your Honour, may I respond on behalf of the persons I represent? What Your Honour's points are being taken on board, are being addressed, and are being given the most earnest consideration by the authorities. And Mr. Jackson would probably not have been of any assistance in any event, because his role and his responsibility is in relation to the translation of matters. It's not in relation to these sorts of matters. However, Mr. O'Brien, who will give evidence before Your Honour, is able to assist Your Honour in regard to some of the matters Your Honour has raised. And I can assure Your Honour that to the extent to which Mr. O'Brien is unable to assist Your Honour, we will do everything that we can to ensure that the Commission is given the assistance that is required from us and to help the Commission.
The assumption I make at the moment is that if there is to be change, it's change that has to be ultimately sanctioned, if not directed by New York. Am I right?
Your Honour, ultimately it's a matter for submission. We understand Your Honour's points, and we understand Your Honour's particular concern about the environment in which these matters are reported. So that's not been lost upon us at all. The question, I think, at the end of the day is the adaptability of the present structure to these individual circumstances of any particular person, and whether that present structure is inappropriate, so it must be done away with, or whether the appropriate structure can be modelled for the purposes of an individual person's case. And that's really, I think, probably one of the most difficult questions that the Commission will have to deal with at the end of the day.
It is, but if there is to be change, again, I'd assumed that change has to be either directed or sanctioned in New York.
Well, Your Honour, it may be the case. It depends upon what change is contemplated. My instructions are, my understanding is that the local branch has significant flexibility in adapting the judicial committee procedure to the individual case. As Your Honour, I think, has heard and will hear, The Elders' Handbook is for elders worldwide, but the autonomy of the branches enables the branches to tailor these matters for individual cases, and that's part of what Mr. Spinks's evidence is about today. So that it may be that...
Well, I'm still at a loss because, as I understand it, the ultimate framework comes from New York.
No, Your Honour, the ultimate framework comes from the Scriptures, in the sense...
All right,
yeah.
but that, as interpreted by New York.
Perhaps as interpreted, but also we would say as set down in the Scriptures, so that the structure may not be changeable. But
You see, that's a serious issue. And if the way the Scriptures are being interpreted and applied is creating additional trauma for people who are sexually abused by members of the church, that's a serious problem.
Understood, Your Honour. I think that, again, ultimately it's a matter for submissions. I think our submission at the end of the day will be that the structure itself doesn't create or exacerbate the trauma that has been suffered. What is required is for the structure to be adapted to the individual person so as to ensure...
Well, that may be your submission, but I should put you on notice that that's not a submission which at the moment I think is going to deal with the problem we have.
Understood, Your Honour. And that's why perhaps at the end of all of the witnesses that are to come, if I can put it this way, that Your Honour's concerns will be hopefully addressed, but certainly to the extent to which they're not, I can assure Your Honour that the Jehovah's Witnesses will cooperate in addressing such matters.
Let me, I suppose, illustrate it in a direct way.
Yes, Your Honour.
We've now conducted more than 3,800 private sessions as part of the Royal Commission's work.
Yes, Your Honour.
Which are people who have been abused coming and telling us their story with the expectation that their story will be accepted. We have a variety of requests from people as to the commissioner person who actually receives their story. And there are some who will say, I only want to talk to a woman.
Yes, Your Honour.
There are others who will say, I only want to talk to a man.
Yes, Your Honour.
One needs to be able to say, if you're in the process of receiving these sorts of allegations, one needs to be able to say that we can meet a request like that in order not to impose trauma on the person when they come to tell their story.
Understood, Your Honour. I mean, Your Honour, the very point Your Honour makes is to a certain extent covered in the Elders' Handbook, to a certain extent. I don't say completely, but to a certain extent in paragraph 24 of the Elders' Handbook, where a sister within the faith may go to another sister within the faith to disclose matters.
Yes, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the process, and I think you know I'm talking about the whole process. And there's a second step in this, and that is the need to have the survivor confront the abuser.
Yes, Your Honour.
Now, all of our learning in the civil courts tells us that that process is likely to create, for some people, extraordinary trauma.
Yes, Your Honour.
And we need to look at that process as well.
Yes, Your Honour. Your Honour, accepting, I do not for 1 second cavil with Your Honour, accepting that what Your Honour has said, it's our understanding that the more sensitive the response at every step along the way, the less the chance of inflicting or imposing further trauma or exacerbating the situation for the survivor. So that our response is that at every step along the way, it needs to be sensitive to the individual needs of that person, bearing in mind both our understanding of secular rights, that is, the right for the individual to report the matter, and at the same time to respect the individual's desire for scriptural counselling or for the matter to be dealt with within the faith. So those considerations need to be balanced in dealing with the matter.
That doesn't answer the problem we have, because the starting point for the discussion is an adherent is required to report. So it's not a question of seeking to have their allegation determined by the church. The obligation, as we understand it, falls upon them to bring that allegation to the church, and then the church imposes its structure. this is a discussion that we'll need to have
Yes, Your
further down the track. But I just want to make it plain that these are really significant issues. We had thought that perhaps Mr. Jackson might be able to help us with them, but if he can't,
He can't, Your Honour. No.
then so be it. Now, we had, I've forgotten her name, but the doctor last Friday.
Dr. Applewhite, Your Honour. Yes.
And you realise where her evidence ended up
Yes, I do, Your Honour, yes.
in terms of the church's processes.
Yes, Your Honour.
Although she came to say that they were good, the ultimate position, as we understand what she said, is they're flawed. And those flaws are the things that I'm talking to you about now.
Yes, I understand, Your Honour. We do understand, Your Honour. And obviously these matters have to be addressed and have to be addressed to assist the Commission. I don't wish to take up more of Your Honour's time now, and I'm conscious of the
Anyway, if Mr. Jackson can't help and
He can't, Your Honour.
then there we are.
But Mr. O'Brien will be of assistance, Your Honour, and Mr. Spinks will be of assistance, Your Honour. Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes.
Moving on, Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Geoffrey Jackson, who's a member of the governing body, as I understand, he heads the teaching committee, is that right?
He's a member of two committees. My understanding is that each of the governing body members are members of two committees. I understand he is a member of the writing committee and the teaching committee.
Yes. Well, I have to say my information as of September 2014 also puts him as a member of the personnel committee.
Well, that's a bit different to my understanding.
Well, we'll leave personnel out of it for a moment. So, but Mr. Jackson is, I'm not sure what the designation is, whether it's coordinator or chair or responsible for, but he's in effect the head or responsible for the teaching committee, isn't he?
No, I don't think the chairman is simply the similar role of being a coordinator of the branch committee is that he just coordinates the work of that committee, but doesn't have like executive authority over the committee.
Yes, no, very well, that's what I'm getting at. So he's the coordinator of the teaching committee.
I don't know. I know he's a member of the teaching committee and of the writing committee.
Yes.
But his actual function, I don't know.
And the teaching committee has the responsibilities set out in the branch organisation manual that we were looking at a few minutes ago, is that right?
Yes, the role that is mentioned there.
And that includes what will be taught in the various Kingdom of Ministry schools and a whole plethora of other means by which publishers around the world are taught about your word, is that right?
Some of the schools would be the responsibility of the service committee. If it's schools for elders and travelling overseas, the service committee would care for the...
And Shepherd the Flock of God is the guiding textbook which would guide also the activities of the teaching committee.
I think that would be probably something approved by the entire governing body, but perhaps coming more from the service committee because it's service related.
And I understand that you've not served as a member of the governing body, so I'm asking you from what your understanding is. But your understanding is that the 7 members of the governing body, as a governing body, meets weekly, does it, every Wednesday?
Yes, so those who are present meet weekly.
Yes. And it'll be that governing body as a whole, or those who are present, who would authorise the various publications and guides and guidelines and so on, is that right?
They would give the final approval for the publishing of them, yes.
Now, you will have heard yesterday that senior counsel representing the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Australia said that Mr. Jackson would not be likely to be able to assist this commission because his role is in the translation of matters. Now, that you accept as a clear variance to what you've explained in your evidence.
No, sorry, it's not. The translation, it comes under the writing committee, as I understand, which is what Mr. Jackson is a member of. So.
Yes, but he's also the coordinator of the teaching committee that has many other responsibilities and not translation, not so.
Yeah, as a member of the governing body, he has
Yes,
a number.
can you explain, Mr. O'Brien, how it came about that senior counsel representing your organisation was given instructions that Mr. Jackson's role is confined to the translation matters when it clearly is not?
His role, as I understand, is principally translation, but translation is part of the writing committee. As a governing body member, he has numerous functions to perform, not just as a translator.
Yes, indeed. And as a consequence of those numerous functions, he would have knowledge across a whole scope of activity of the governing body, not so.
I guess he would have...
Far beyond translations.
Yes, yeah, more than translation.
Mr. O'Brien, did you give those instructions to senior counsel?
The instructions regarding Mr. Jackson? Yes.
It led me to believe that there was little that Mr. Jackson could add to the discussion. And no doubt that's what you expected would happen. Is that right?
That's true, and I still concur with that.
Well, I'm starting to form a totally different impression, I have to tell you.
Well, if I could explain that Mr. Jackson, his two principal roles, as far as I understand in the governing body, are with the writing and the other committee, the two committees I've mentioned, the writing, and part of that involves translation. Mr. Jackson was in the Pacific Islands for many years, understood many of the Pacific Island languages, helped...
Well, I understand that he may have a role in translation, but I'm now coming to understand he has a significant role in relation to teaching, but also the general affairs of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
He wouldn't have involvement in matters to do with the Coordinators Committee, which handles legal, nor with the Service Committee, which handles service matters.
But he sits at the top with others in relation to all of those committees, doesn't he?
No, they're different governing body members are assigned specifically to different committees.
I understand that, but nevertheless, the governing body, I assume, has the ultimate say in all things.
When things come back to them as a governing body, yes.
And he's a member of that.
Yes, he's a member of the governing body.
He's here in Australia.
He's with his father. Well, I understand he's still in Australia. I don't talk with Mr. Jackson, but I understand his father is gravely ill, very close to death, and that's why he's here, to be with his father.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Mr. Chocolate?
No, Your Honour, thank you.
Very well. Mr. Stewart?
Your Honour, there is a matter that, in fairness, I must put to Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien, you've given evidence that you gave instructions to counsel on the point of Mr. Jackson not being able to assist and his activities being with relation to translations. And I, as a matter of fairness, must put to you that those instructions you gave were false, were they not?
No, I don't believe so. Mr. Jackson does oversee the translation work, but as part of the writing committee member, which he is one of the governing body members on that committee. So,
and I suggest to you, I put to you, that when you gave those instructions, you knew them to be false.
No, I disagree.
And by giving those instructions, you sought to mislead the Royal Commission to protect Mr. Jackson from any potential summons to appear.
No, I disagree. I think the reason we asked consideration to be shown to Mr. Jackson was the grave situation of his father, the very reason he's in Australia.
Yes, well, and in relation to that, in view of what I've put to you, perhaps you can answer this. How are we to know if what you say about Mr. Jackson's compassionate circumstances is in fact true?
We could provide an affidavit if you wish. We could provide doctors' reports on his father, whatever the Royal Commission would like. I'm sure we can arrange for that.
How long has he been in Australia?
I'm not sure, Your Honour, but I think maybe a week or two, a couple of weeks perhaps.
He's been here since before the 14th of July, hasn't he?
Yeah, I don't know specifically. I could find out, but I don't know exactly when he arrived. But it's only within the last couple of weeks.
I'm not including him.
Well, before I come to that, Mr. Tockley, I'm not at the moment. I'm troubled by what I now understand as to the role of Mr. McDonald in the organisation. And it does seem that, having regard to the issues we've canvassed, he would be able to help. Do you want to respond to that?
Your Honour, I can respond. I can certainly try and take further instructions for reasons that are obvious. I think that Your Honour is entitled to whatever assistance should be provided to Your Honour. My understanding remains, as I was instructed, that in relation to these legal matters, Mr. Jackson would be of no assistance.
It's not legal matters that the discussion has moved a little from the history to the future.
Yes.
And at the moment, I can presently understand the injunction that's felt in relation to elders.
Yes, Your Honour.
But a deliberative process for the church, it's possible to imagine it being one which was not entirely conducted by elders. But secondly, a process which the church engages in because of its adherence to the Bible, which allows a person those who are deciding the matter have no doubt has committed abuse to nevertheless remain in the community, raises other issues as well.
Yes, Your Honour.
And they won't have eluded you or Mr. Coyne as they were raised.
No, Your Honour.
I mean, if you put yourself in a position to care for other people and you fail, then consequences flow. Now, these are issues which clearly have emerged from our discussion, and we would like as much help as we can. And as he's in the country, it would seem logical that we ask him to come and help us.
I understand Your Honour's point, and I'm not seeking to not address Your Honour's point.
No, I understand that. And having said that, I appreciate the circumstances of his father, but we all have to face those difficulties from time to time in our lives.
Yes, Your Honour.
And what I'm going to say is I would like you to take up the matter with Mr. Stewart, and we'll make arrangements sometime next week to hear evidence from Mr. McDonald, unless... sorry?
Jackson.
Oh, Jackson, I'm sorry. Mr. Jackson, unless Mr. Stewart comes to me and says that can't be done.
I understand, Your Honour.
All right. Now, secondly, beyond that, Mr. Stewart has, I haven't seen it, but a standard form of directions for submissions. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honour.
Has that been agreed between everyone?
I'm not sure that it's been agreed. I did canvass it with some, but we have a 4-week for submissions from our side and 4-week from other interested parties. So it's a fairly
standard
period of time.
Unless anyone says otherwise, I'll make those directions. But can I say this to, I suppose, Mr. Tockley, it's to you again, I'm sorry.
Sure. Not at all, Your Honour.
But it will be quite apparent now that some of the documentation of your clients just doesn't fit either the practice or what they accept should should be the position. And what we'd like from you is a draft of the revisions which you proffer as appropriate, having regard to the discussion that's taken place.
Yeah. I understand why Your Honour would say that. I'm not seeking to avoid assisting the Commission or to assist Your Honour. I think that the process that may be contemplated, though, in light of what's fallen during the last 2 weeks, is for there to be a review of the procedures, but also at the same time for those procedures to be considered by professional persons, such as, for example, a psychiatrist or psychologist or a professionally trained counsellor, to ensure that any proposed revision would not result in further trauma being caused.
That may be a course that obviously has attraction.
Yes, Your Honour.
But the starting point is to identify where you or your client accepts the problems are.
Yes, Your Honour.
And some of those are blatantly obvious from the words, not according to the practice. And then moving on from there, what steps your client might take.
Yes, Your Honour.
To bring its processes and its documentation up to an appropriate position.
Yes, Your Honour.
Which may include consultation with professional people.
Yes, Your Honour.
Which is what's happened in other organisations we've looked at. For example, the YMCA have conducted a complete review with the help of professional people.
Yes, Your Honour.
And we would be looking for you to proffer to us what your client accepts would be the appropriate course to take, and then we can have a look at it.
Yes,
if we don't agree, we'll say so. If we think it should go further, we'll say that as well.
Thank you.
But the starting point is to understand what your client accepts should happen.
Yes, no, I understood, Your Honour. I anticipate that a part of our submissions will be devoted to the matters Your Honour has raised with me, and it'll probably set out the steps that will be involved as well in dealing with that aspect of the matter.
And what we will then do, we live for another 2.5 years, we'll come back to you and we'll expect to be told what's happened.
I don't know about that, Your Honour. No,
well, we'll do that. There's no doubt. There's no doubt we'll do that.
I suppose what I was saying was I wouldn't have thought that such a process would take 2.5 years. That's what
I don't know. I hope it doesn't.
One hopes so, Your Honour.
But we'll come back to you within the 2.5 years, as we're doing with other organisations, to ask your client, what have you done?
Yes, certainly, Your Honour.
And we'll expect that process to occur in public.
Thank you, Your Honour.
All right.
Yes. Your Honour, just before my learned friend rises, Your Honour, I can assure Your Honour that there was no intention, obviously, on my part to mislead Your Honour in any way.
We accept that.
Thank you, Your Honour. Your Honour, the other aspect of it is that, if I may, it may be necessary for my learned friend Mr Stewart and I to perhaps approach Your Honour in relation to Mr Jackson's medical condition, simply because of the privacy of the matter, and to inform Your Honour.
Well, it's the medical condition of his father.
Yes, Your Honour.
As I understand it.
It is, Your Honour, yes.
And at the moment, that's all I know.
No, I understand.
And that's not enough for me now, given what I know about his role in the organisation.
Understood, Your Honour.
To say that we shouldn't have the benefit of his understanding.
No, well, I think I'll endeavour to obtain a consultant specialist report on the matter.
That won't actually necessarily solve the problem.
I understand, Your Honour. Understand.
It's regrettable, and I appreciate his position, but we all have to face these issues as well as our other responsibilities. And this Royal Commission, of course, carries great responsibilities for many, many people.
Yeah, understood.
And some of whom are members of his church.
Yes, no, it's understood, Your Honour. Thank you, Your Honour.
Yeah. Yes.
I might hand up the direction with regard to submissions. It's self-explanatory, I believe. If there's to be any appreciable delay on the matters Your Honour has been discussing with my learned friend, then you might approach Your Honour with regard to an amendment of the direction.
Yes, well, we'll face that when we come to it if we need to. But otherwise, I've made the directions in those terms. Mr. Tockley, feel free to approach Mr. Stewart if that's necessary.
Thank you, Your Honour. The only other
The expectation we have is that at an appropriate time next week, there'll be maybe 1 or 2 hours set aside.
Understood, Your Honour. The only other thing, Your Honour, Dr. Applewhite's supplementary report. Does Your Honour require that to be incorporated into the orders? Your Honour mentioned 2 weeks.
2 weeks is what I said. I think that's plain.
Yes, Your Honour.
Are we going to get one?
Yes, Your Honour.
All right. Well, then we look forward to it.
Your Honour, can it be 2 weeks from today? Simply
You're
because,
asking for an extension.
well, Your Honour, if I may, please.
You
Your
can
Honour.
have 2 weeks, or she can have 2 weeks from today.
Thank you, Your Honour.
All right. But no more.
Understood, Your Honour. Thank you.
Nothing further from our side.
Very well. Well, we thank everyone for your assistance, and it may be necessary for us to resume again next week, but people will be notified in due course.
Thank you.
Otherwise, we'll adjourn.
All stand.